Wow. This is some good art. This is peak. Now this is what art's all about. You know, y'all got all these people doing all this. Oh hey, didn't see you there. How you doing? So I said a few days ago, I would tell you what the game's art style would be like going forward. In as few words as possible, the main art theme of the game would be best described as Victorian Gothic. And I know what you're thinking. Folk, in what world does this look like Victorian Gothic? It doesn't. This is garbage. This doesn't look like any. This is nothing. Now, I believe I said that I wasn't really focused on graphics when the core systems of the game don't exist yet. And if you believe me, I'm not focused on the graphics of the game when the core systems don't exist yet. Currently, the graphics in my game can be divided into a few categories: the models, the shader, and the color palettes. I have a few color palettes. There's the ones that are used to texture the models that you've seen. It's a 64 by 64 texture with only a very small portion of that actually being used to have any color. There's the one that I use in the shader, and now there's the one that I use in the texture, which I need to make an entirely new video on because how we're using the UI texture is now completely different than how we were doing it. It's now some other system that honestly is super cool, and I am very excited to share with you what is going on and how I've solved a problem with it. It's gonna be good. You'll see. But the palette that makes the biggest difference in the game is by far the one used in the shader. The color palette used in the shader is what actually determines what you see in the 3D world. The shader used in the texture determines, you know, this is a general green, but what green you actually end up seeing is purely in the shader. So it's really, really important. It makes the biggest difference. If you swap it out, it'll totally change how the game feels. And I'm kind of still fine-tuning what that looks like. So the look of the game, color-wise, may change over time. And frankly, I have it in my heart of hearts to just choose a color palette from an old console and just go with that. Like, just choose the Sega Genesis color palette and just what it looks like is what it looks like, but at the same time, I also kind of want to fine-tune it, and maybe that I do both. I don't know. We'll see. For the textures, the color palette that I'm using is literally the default color palette that is used in ProMotion NG. It's limited. Particularly, I've noticed that it's quite limited in terms of skin tones, and the fact that skin tones don't exist, which is why some of the characters have jaundice or are pale, just pure white in complexion. I don't have skin tones in the color palette yet. I need to add that. It is what it is. What are you gonna do? The camera is currently almost orthographic, and I don't plan on actually making it really orthographic. There's a really cool effect that you get when you're in the upper floors of the school when you look outside. The things in the distance, when you move your camera, move a huge distance. There's a sweepingly huge distance, whereas what's close to you kind of moves in a normal way, and that dies if you have orthographic camera, actually proper orthographic camera. So I like how it looks now, and essentially we're like almost orthographic because the focal length is like 7 degrees and the camera is way off in the distance. It's so small that it looks normal. It's a good effect. I fuck with it. The models are all pretty low poly. I try to keep them at around 600 tries, but sometimes you get a model that's more complicated that ends up being like 1,000 tries. I don't think any one model is above 1,500, which is important because if you have 200 models, you multiply the average try count by 200 and you get some crazy number, and that's how many tries that the game needs to process every frame. So there are ways around this, like occlusion culling, which will be a thing. I need to re-implement occlusion culling to the grid map, which should help with things. For some of the models, I want to go back and actually like pose them a bit better, because in my head, they're pretty much representing like a plastic model, so they should have a bit more gesture to them. They're a bit flat right now, and while this is okay for right now and how they move around like that, they should be more posed in the future, so I have to go back and actually change how they look and what's going on with them and all that kind of thing. If you like what I'm doing, if you like what you see here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps a lot. Thank you very much. So Victorian Gothic. Yes, we're back to Victorian Gothic. If you look that up on Google, what you'll find is that it's best described as basically your stereotypical vampire vibe. But I don't want to just do Victorian Gothic. I want to do Victorian Gothic meets weird, zany, cartoonist type stuff. So a really good example of this is actually Soul Eater. How Soul Eater does its architecture is a really good example of the kind of stuff I want to do. So if you took Victorian Gothic and Pantheon Stalking and Soul Eater and you kind of crushed it into this low poly piece of shit game, that's the general vibe I'm going for. So you know, low poly, Victorian styled stuff, wacky angles, zigzagged architecture, that kind of thing. So I think it looks good. I think I see the vision. I don't know if you see the vision with me, but I see the vision of how things are going to look, and I think it is fairly unique. Now, unfortunately, sound design is kind of the ugly duckling of the game design space. Although sound design is arguably more important than visual design in how the game feels, there's a lot of information that you can't experience through visual means alone, like the texture of wood. Take this for example right now in this video, okay? If I rub my hand down the side and I don't have any sound effect there, it means nothing. But now you can like feel. You know what it feels like. There's a feeling there that you didn't have before, and it's purely from the sound alone. There's nothing else was added to this. It's pure sound. So sound design literally lets you feel, it lets you know the texture of things. So sound design should never, ever be overlooked. It is extremely important. So what am I doing for sound design? If you haven't noticed yet, I have a bit of a autistic stick up my ass that tells me I need to optimize things as much as humanly possible. Sound goes into that. Now there's a few things you can do with sound that will give a certain kind of feel. And given the nature of the game visually, having the sound design match that feel also matters. So my game looks old. It looks low poly. It looks almost PS1, but not quite. And it's kind of, but it's in that realm. It's in that area. So visually, it's occupying old in your mind. So if I have really crisp sounds that are like really high fidelity and crazy good, it's a bit of a mismatch. Now you will compensate for that being like, indie. You know what I mean? Like, there's indie games that do this all the time. But there's still a bit of a mismatch there. But if you have the sound design be low aesthetic, lo-fi, while the visuals are also matching the lo-fi aesthetic, being that it's low poly and grainy and all that, what you'll find is that you won't notice that the sounds are not quite up with the par with a 441 kilohertz CD that you might find following Red Book standards, right? I'm going to leverage the sound matching the visuals, and have my sounds crushed, be a bit smaller in size. What we can do is that we can, instead of having an uncompressed .wav file, we can follow along with Insane Aquarium's way of doing things, where it uses sound effects in the OGG Vorbis format. That's right, 25 years ago, they're using OGGs. By golly, I love me an OGG. This is how big an uncompressed WAV file is. This is how big literally just converting it to an OGG format is. And this is how big that same file is compressed to the size that I'm going to be using with the quality that I will be having. Look at how small that is. This is crazy. It's tiny. It's absolutely tiny. And that works for sound effects and can work for music, but what if I want my music to sound good still, but I still want it to be small? What technology exists out there for me to use to have small music? If I'm using pre-made music, there isn't any. This is the best we can do. However, if we make music, and while I am not inclined to do so, some people have offered to make music, and one person has at least said they will try to go along with my whims of this bullshit. There exists a thing called MIDI. You can actually use MIDI in Ableton and FL Studio, and I own a piece of software called Renoise, which works fantastically for MIDI. And what MIDI does, essentially, is it stores what notes you play, at what pitch, for how long. Essentially, what MIDI is the instructions to play the song instead of the song itself. And there's a Godot plugin that will actually play the MIDI files. There's a MIDI player in Godot already. So you get the plugin, you get the MIDI file, and you get the sound font, which is the actual sounds that'll be played. And what happens is that the music file essentially gets played to you live. It's running through the instructions, it's getting the sound from the sound font, and then it's saying play it for this long at this pitch, move on to the next one, play for this long at this pitch, move on to the next one, note by note. Given that, sound files go from this big to this big. crazy shrinkage in terms of how much the music takes up. There are even optimizations we can make in terms of file storage size with sound. Now, one more thing in regards to sound is that I am going to implement an audio manager, which is essentially a scene that has a bunch of audio streams in it, and instead of having your audio stream attached to whatever is actually playing the audio, you essentially request that an audio file be played from the audio manager. You say, please play this file, and it says no, or it says, yeah, okay. And what it does essentially is there's a list of audio streams, and it searches through those, finds one that isn't playing anything, and then plays the file you requested. This is great. There are some things I have to do, some research I have to go through to actually make it better, but in its current form, in its very simplest implementation, if you have like 20 audio files requesting to be played, that it only plays 5. If it goes through the list and it's too full, it gets dropped currently. Now, there are different ways we could do that. We could queue it up until the queue is full, because we don't want to have a long line of delayed audio files, and it's not actually, like, there are things I have to do in regards to making this a good class, but in its current simplest state, it just means that if too many sounds are being played, you won't hear more than 5 at a time, which should save eardrums, because it might be kind of concerned about premature optimization, which is a fair concern to have. I'm sure that we've all heard, don't optimize prematurely. It's more work in the future, and this holds true with code. With code, that makes a lot of sense. However, with asset creation, it makes a lot more sense to get a defined workflow. Get your workflow defined as soon as you can so that you don't have to remake all your assets later. And that's basically what we've done. I have defined how I'll be making my audio files. I have defined how I'll be making my visual files. The way that I'm going to be making all of my assets for the game, and what quality I want them to be at, and how they should be and how they should act and all that stuff. Getting that defined now legitimately makes the end result better. So let's say like I'm unhappy with my optimization for images down the road. I would then have to make a new workflow, I would re-optimize, and then I would have to remake all of my assets over again, which is purely wasted time. Wasted time re-rendering stuff, remaking things, and for what essentially would be no visual difference. Premature optimization absolutely exists in code, but it's less so of a problem with asset creation. So define your workflow, make your assets, and your life will be easier in the long run because you won't have to remake everything. But then anyway, my throat is now really dry for some reason, and I have to go. This recording is now over. I would like to thank my patrons. With them, I was able to get this green screen, which is making my life a lot better. I wasn't using the green screen before. I was using DaVinci Resolve's AI Magic Mask, which it took a long time to render things, and so my life was sitting there for like actually multiple hours just waiting for things to render, and then I would have to render it in place, and then I would render it again to actually produce the video at the very end. So I was rendering clips like 3 times, and this will help with that. It'll also make thumbnail creation a lot easier, so I would like to thank them a lot. Their names should have passed by on screen by now, so don't forget to like and subscribe.